The knock on Eli Mercer's door was so weak he almost ignored it. The wind that night was fierce, screaming down from the Wyoming mountains and slamming against his cabin like it wanted to tear the whole place apart. Snow whipped sideways, sharp as sand, and the pine logs of the walls groaned under the pressure. No one traveled in weather like this unless they were running from something worse than the storm. Eli had seen 35 winters in the Wyoming Territory. He knew the sound of danger. And that knock did not sound like trouble looking to fight. It sounded like someone about to die. He set down his leatherwork and reached for his Winchester, not because he was cruel, but because a man alone in the mountains learned to be careful. He moved to the door and called out through the howl of the wind, "Yeah, who's there?" The answer came thin and shaking, "Please." That was all. Eli opened the door and the storm tried to shove its way inside. Snow blew across the floor in a white burst. And there she stood, a woman in a dark blue wool dress stiff with ice. Snow clung to her hair, which might have been auburn under all that frost. Her lips were pale, almost gray. One hand clutched a small carpet bag like it was the last thing she owned in the world. For one long second, Eli saw how close she was to freezing where she stood. He didn't ask questions. He grabbed her by the arm and pulled her inside, fighting the wind until the door slammed shut again. She was shaking so hard her teeth made a sound like tapping glass. "Change out of those wet clothes," he said, already pulling a dry flannel shirt from a peg on the wall, yet he turned his back and held it out. Wet cloth kills faster than a bullet. He fed more wood into the iron stove until the fire roared hot and bright. Behind him he heard frozen buttons fighting to open, cloth dropping to the floor. When he turned again, she stood wrapped in his oversized shirt, her dress in a heap at her feet, her body trembling but alive. He handed her a blanket and guided her to the chair closest to the stove. Then he poured coffee into a tin cup and pressed it into her shaking hands. "Slow," he said. Color began to creep back into her cheeks. Not much, but enough. When she finished the coffee, he gave her a bowl of thick bean soup. She ate like someone who had not seen a warm meal in days, careful at first, then steady. Only when the worst of the shaking stopped did he finally ask, "Well, why are you out in a storm like this?" She lifted her eyes to him. They were green, clear, even through exhaustion. "My name is Margaret Doyle," she said. "I came from Boston to marry Owen Blackledge." Eli's jaw tightened just a little. Owen Blackledge owned the largest ranch in the valley, a man who measured everything in profit. "He changed his mind," she continued. "Said I was not suitable for ranch life. Left me at the crossroads with money for a coach back east." "In this weather?" Eli asked quietly. "There is no coach until the storm ends. The hotel wanted payment in advance. I did not have enough for both room and food." She did not cry. She did not beg. She simply told the truth. Eli looked at her for a long moment, a woman who had sold everything to travel across the country, yet who had been judged in 10 seconds and thrown away like a bad purchase. "Eli Mercer, Iseti," he said. "You can stay here until the storm breaks." She straightened a little, even wrapped in his blanket. "I will work. I can cook, clean, so I won't be a burden." "Nobody's talking about burden," he said. "Storm like this, you give shelter. That's just how it is." The wind slammed against the cabin again as if arguing, but the walls held firm. Eli had built this place tight, every crack sealed with mud and grass. It would stand. That night he gave her his bed and rolled out his buffalo robe near the stove. He could hear her breathing from across the room, still uneven but steady. After a long silence, her voice drifted through the dark. Why didn't you ask more questions about why he sent me away? Eli stared at the glow of the stove. Because I know Owen Blackledge, he said. And men like him don't change their minds without a reason. You think I'm pretty? She asked softly, almost like she hated herself for saying it. I think you're alive, he answered. In a storm like this, that's what matters. She made a small sound that could have been a laugh or a quiet sob. He did not look to see. By morning, the storm had not ended. Snow covered the world in thick white silence. The barn was half buried. The mountains were gone behind clouds. They were cut off from everything. Maggie stood at the frost-covered window, breathing warmth onto the glass. Eli watched her from the stove as he worked leather with his needle again. He felt something shift inside him. His life had been quiet, simple. Cattle, weather, work, sleep. But now there was a woman in his cabin who had been thrown away like she meant nothing. Outside, the wind picked up again. Inside, something else was beginning, and neither of them yet understood how much that knock on the door would change everything. Snow kept falling for 3 more days, sealing the cabin off from the rest of Sweetwater Valley like they were the only 2 souls left in the world. By the second morning, Maggie was no longer trembling when she woke. She moved around the small cabin, careful but steady, heating oats on the stove while Eli broke ice in the water bucket outside. She worked like someone who had decided she would not be pitied. I meant what I said, she told him, handing him a tin plate. I will earn my keep. Everybody works here, Eli replied. That's just living. She began with his shirts at the tears in the shoulders, the worn cuffs, the small rips he had ignored for months. Her needle moved quickly and surely. When she handed one back, the tear was gone like it had never been there. Boston schoolteacher? He asked. Yes. Don't look much like a ranch wife. I was supposed to, she said quietly. She told him about the letters. 2 months of promises, talk of partnership and respect, talk of building something together. Owen Blackledge had written about needing a woman who could read and keep accounts, who would stand beside him when the railroad came through. Then he took one look at me at the station, she said, staring into the fire, and decided I would not do. Eli said nothing at first. He had known for a long time. He knew the way the man thought. Railroad men had been sniffing around this valley, Eli said slowly. Married men get certain claim rights. Might be he needed a wife for paperwork. Then the deal changed. Maggie turned to him. So I was just paperwork. Maybe, Eli said, but that's on him, not you. That night, the cold dropped so low the walls cracked like rifle shots. Even with the stove burning hot, frost crept along the edges of the floor. From the bed, Maggie's teeth began to chatter again. This is foolish, she whispered. You take your bed back. Neither of us is freezing for the sake of pride, Eli answered. He carried his buffalo robe to the bed and laid it over the blankets, the cold still pressed in. After an hour of listening to her try to stay quiet through the shaking, he made a choice. I'm sitting on the bed, he said, on top of the covers. We share heat, that's all. There was a long pause. All right, she said. He sat against the headboard, careful to leave space. She leaned into him slowly like a colt, unsure of its footing. He wrapped one arm around her shoulders, nothing more, just warmth, just survival. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, they breathed together. By dawn, the cold eased. She had fallen asleep against him sometime in the night. He did not move until she stirred. Thank you, she said softly, pulling away. We survived, he replied. That's what matters. But something had changed. On the fourth day, the storm broke. The sky cleared hard and bright. Snow lay deep across the valley, smooth and blinding under the sun. They stepped outside together, carving a narrow path to the barn. The cattle were safe. The pregnant heifer was restless. "Not today," Eli said, running his hands along the animal's side. "Maybe tomorrow." Maggie held the lantern and watched him work. "She's beautiful," she said. "She's profitable," he answered out of habit. "She can be both," Maggie replied. He glanced at her, and for the first time she laughed. Not small, not careful, a real laugh that echoed in the barn and warmed him more than the stove ever could. That afternoon, horses appeared on the trail. Eli saw them first. The silver studs on the saddle gave it away. "Owen," he muttered. Maggie's face went pale, but she did not run. Owen Blackledge rode up tall and confident. Sheriff Amos Hale beside him, two hired hands behind. "Heard you harbor my bride," Owen said, voice smooth as oil. "She ain't your bride," Eli answered calmly. "I paid for her passage, paid for arrangements, and that makes her mine." The cabin door opened. Maggie stepped out straight back in her blue dress. "I am not property, Mr. Blackledge," she said clearly enough for all to hear. "You terminated our agreement yourself." She held out the paper he had given her at the crossroads. Sheriff Hale read it slowly. "Agreement terminated. No further obligation on either party." Owen's face reddened. "That paper means nothing." "It means you threw me away," Maggie said in a blizzard. Silence stretched tight. Sheriff Hale cleared his throat. "Miss Doyle is here by her own will." "I am," Maggie said. Owen's eyes darkened. "You're staying in his cabin alone." Eli stepped forward then, not raising his rifle, but close enough. "She came to my door freezing," he said. "It's a Christian thing to give shelter." Owen's hand hovered near his gun. "Ah, careful," Eli warned quietly. The tension hung like a storm cloud. Finally, the sheriff spoke again. "No crime here. Paper's clear." Owen glared at Maggie. "This isn't over." He turned his horse hard and rode off, snow flying behind him. When they were gone, Maggie's knees weakened. Eli caught her before she fell. "He'll make trouble," she whispered. "Let him," Eli said. "Truth's on your side." That evening, as they sat by the fire, he spoke words he had not planned. "We could marry," he said. "Stop the talk before it starts." She looked at him steadily. "Is that what you want?" "I want you safe," he answered. She shook her head slowly. "If we marry, it won't be because he pushed us. It will be because we choose it." He nodded. "All right." They sat in silence after that, the fire snapping between them. Outside, the valley was waking from winter. Inside, something stronger than fear was growing. Sunday morning came cold and bright, the kind of morning when the sky looks honest, and the whole valley feels like it is holding its breath. The small church in Sweetwater was fuller than usual. Word had spread. Folks wanted to see what would happen next. Eli sat in the back beside Maggie. She wore her blue wool dress, mended, clean and simple. He wore his one good shirt, collar stiff, boots polished as best old leather allowed. Owen Blackledge sat in the front pew like he owned the place. After the sermon, Reverend Cole cleared his throat. "Miss Doyle has asked to speak." A murmur moved through the room like wind through grass. Maggie stood. She walked to the front slowly and steadily. Her hands did not shake. "I came to Wyoming in good faith," she began. I answered Mr. Blackledge's advertisement for a wife. I sold everything I owned. I left my home based on his written promises. She held up the letters, then she held up the termination paper. He ended the agreement himself in writing. He left me at a crossroads during a storm. The church was silent now. Mr. Mercer saved my life. He gave me shelter with complete respect. If there is sin here, it is not his and it is not mine. Owen stood red-faced. She's twisting the truth, he barked. I am telling it, Maggie replied. Sheriff Hale rose from his seat. I have seen the paper. It is valid. Old Tom Garrett stood next. Eli Mercer helped every one of us at one time or another. Men don't deserve slander. One by one, more people stood. Not all of them, but enough. Owen stormed out before the final hymn. By afternoon, the valley had chosen its side. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the mountains, Eli stood under the old cottonwood by Sweetwater Creek. Reverend Cole waited with his Bible. Neighbors gathered in a half circle. Maggie walked toward Eli with quiet steps. They had not planned a grand wedding. No lace, no music, just sky and honest ground. Do you take this woman? The Reverend asked. I do, Eli answered before the question finished. And do you take this man? I do, Maggie said clearly. He slid his mother's simple gold ring onto her finger. It fit like it had been waiting there all along. When he kissed her, brief and careful, the valley seemed to exhale. But Owen was not finished. As the celebration carried on, smoke rose from the direction of Eli's ranch. Fire! They ran. The hay barn was already burning, flames climbing high into the spring sky. Eli did not shout in anger. He shouted in command, Bucket line, keep it from spreading. Maggie grabbed a shovel and began cutting a fire break in the dry grass. Dress tearing, hands blistering. The neighbors worked beside her. The whole valley moved as one body. The barn collapsed in sparks, but the cabin stood. Sheriff Hale rode in hard. Caught Jake Coulter running from the place with a torch, he said. He says he acted alone. Everyone knew better. Owen appeared on horseback at the edge of the field watching. Shame about your barn, he called out smoothly. Eli stepped forward. You burned boards, he said, but you built something stronger. Old Tom Garrett moved to Eli's side, then the Johnson boys, then others. Owen saw it then. He was no longer facing one man. He was facing a community. He rode away without another word. That night, the barn was ash, but neighbors stayed to help. They brought tools, food, plans for rebuilding. Inside the cabin, Maggie washed soot from her face while Eli wrapped her blistered hands. This happened because of me, she whispered. No, Eli said. It happened because he is small. Weeks passed. The barn rose again, stronger than before. Every rancher in the valley had lifted a beam. Every woman had brought food. The gossip faded. Respect grew. Years rolled forward like seasons. The cabin gained 2 more rooms. A porch stretched across the front. A garden flourished. A new schoolhouse stood near the creek where Maggie taught children their letters and their courage. Emma was born first, then Thomas. On summer nights, Maggie would tell them the story of the storm. How Papa opened the door, Emma would say, knowing the ending by heart. 5 years later, Owen returned older, thinner, pride worn down. He came not with threats, but with a lawyer and an offer. The railroad wanted Eli's land for a depot. 3 times what it's worth, Owen said. Eli looked at Maggie. She looked at their children playing near the creek. This land holds our footprints, she said. It's not for sale, Eli answered. Owen stared at them long. You could have had this, he said quietly. No, Maggie replied. You never knew how to build it. He left again, this time for good. The railroad chose another valley. Sweetwater remained what it had always been, hard, honest, home. Years later, under the same cottonwood tree where they had married, the valley gathered again to raise a larger schoolhouse. Maggie stood proudly among her students. Eli stood beside her, hand warm around hers. The wind moved through the leaves, gently and kindly. That night, after the music and laughter faded, they sat on their porch. "Do you ever regret knocking on my door?" Eli asked. "I regret not knocking sooner," Maggie said with a smile. He laughed and pulled her close. The blizzard that had once threatened her life had given them both something they never expected: a home, a family, a community, and a love that was not bought, not claimed, not forced, but chosen. Outside, the creek sang its endless song. Inside, the fire burned steadily and warmly, and the door that had once opened to a desperate knock remained strong, ready to open again if ever someone else needed shelter from the storm.